In a short time, we will have the mayor of the city of Annapolis speak, as well as the president of this amazing historic college we are at today, called St. John's College. Um, and what we will also be doing throughout the course of this day is engaging in an interdisciplinary conversation about gun violence. So, a large part of it is audience participation and involvement. Because in this audience, even as I look right now, we have several thought leaders, several people who are experts in their fields, which intersect with the conversation of gun violence. So, I want to thank you. And at this point, I want to introduce the mayor of the city of Annapolis, Mr. Gavin Buckley.
Thank you all so much for being here. Look, at least it's not raining, and at least it's not windy. So those are two good things that we would rather have it be a little bit warm and appreciate this beautiful grounds and the summer that we're in the middle of. We are standing, I'm standing in front of the Liberty Tree sapling. In 1999, the original Liberty Tree that was on this site was destroyed at Hurricane Floyd. And this tree behind us has grown from a sapling, and that's what I hope that this movement in this town does, that we can grow this movement towards sensible gun control and sensible conversations. I'm happy to have convened this summit, and I'm grateful to all the people who agreed to participate in today's discussions. Today, we'll be looking at the subject of guns in our community from all sides. And the way this event started was after the Capitol Gazette shooting, after grieving with the families, we all had to decide, what are we going to do as a community? What are we going to do to show some support? We originally started out with an idea called the G78 Summit. That is 78 cities that have had mass shootings this century. That doesn't even include Columbine. And so we put that idea forward. It didn't quite gel with the mayor's conference that is going on right now in Hawaii. So I couldn't get enough mayors to come together and stand together on this issue. We are going to program that idea into the fall conference in Washington, D.C. So expect to see in Washington D.C. a lot of mayors coming together in solidarity over this issue, because this is where you have to deal with the issue. They don't deal with it, they're not dealing with it federally, they're not really dealing with it statewide the way we would like to, but we really believe that we can start a grassroots movement, that mayors can make a difference. So I'm hoping to stand in solidarity with 50, 60, 70 mayors. That G78 summit is now a G83 summit. There's been that many more mass shootings since that point. There also, in 2016, we had enough gun violence deaths in the city of Annapolis that it would be the equivalency of the second largest mass shooting in America for that year. So that was over a period of 1 year. So this is not just about mass shootings. This is about the violence that that comes into communities on a daily basis. As the ancient Chinese proverb goes, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. As you sit here, you may feel in your bones that a similar discussion has happened here before. We're on the campus of St. John's for a reason. The founding fathers gathered here to debate big ideas about the founding of this nation. The ideas from the Sons of Liberty gathering around the colonies at the time were revolutionary. Those conversations were the beginning of the greatest social experiment the world has ever known. The things they debated: overthrowing the monarchy, founding a new nation based on democratic ideals, was something that had never been accomplished before. At the time, many of the men heading these discussions were slaveholders. There were no people of color at the table or women. We have changed that today. But the principles of the Sons of Liberty brought to their talks under the Liberty Tree in Boston and on this campus 250 plus years ago are the same that we bring today. An attempt to have civil discourse as a way to work out our way out of the national obscenity of gun violence. It is why I convenes this event. My hope is that we will move a wider discussion to begin to develop real solutions to the problems our country faces regarding the ongoing epidemic of gun violence. This is not a red or a blue issue. When gun violence strikes, the bullets don't care about Republicans or Democrats. This is a public health threat unlike any other among Western nations. It needs to stop. As you all know, a year ago, a gunman barricaded the back door of the Capital Gazette and then shot and killed 5 members of the newspaper staff: Rebecca Smith, Wendy Winters, Rob Hyacin, Gerald Fishman, and John McNamara. Their deaths were heartbreaking for so many of us in this community, in large measure because we knew them. We saw Johnny Mack covering high school football games. We saw Rebecca's face as we stopped by the office to pay for advertising. We ran into Rob at Acton Park where he was contemplating his next column. Gerald wrote the editorials that began debates and conversations around the breakfast table. Wendy was also out covering events and writing stories that defined our community. Their loss felt personal. Their loss broke our hearts. But as deeply as we felt for their loss and heartbreak and continue to mourn their passing, I know that people in other parts of the community have experienced gun violence. Mass shootings aren't the only place where guns and violence leave grief and pain in their wake. Families have had to deal with the aftermath of shooting in areas of our community that are also experiencing poverty. People who are also victims of racial inequity have had to deal with gun violence in their community. Their grief is no less real. Their pain is no less meaningful. I know that a mother who loses her child to gun violence in a drive-by shooting mourns that loss just as deeply as we mourn the loss of the victims of mass shootings. I know that the wife or the child or the sister or the brother or the friend who has witnessed gun violence in their own neighborhood feels exactly the same pain, experiences the same emotions that we saw reporters expressing to Anderson Cooper in the aftermath of the Capital Gazette shooting. I want people in all parts of our community to know that I recognize that pain too. In fact, it ought to have been a powerful motivator towards having this discussion before today, but it definitely needs to be part of our conversation about gun violence moving forward. Tomorrow is 1 year since the Capital Gazette murders took place. Tomorrow is 1 month since the murders in Virginia Beach. Tomorrow is 4 weeks since the drive-by murder in Annapolis of Montre the Kids Say. There are anniversaries of gun violence all over our town and our country. It is heartbreaking. The words that are exchanged here today can be a launch pad for new ideas today or in the future, like discussions around the country. I hope it is the beginning of a wider policy discussion at the city. My hope is that any kind of policy making comes from a desire to do good, a desire to see better outcomes for all people in our community. We can't get there without talking to one another. So thank you. Let's start, and let me introduce the amazing Pano who lets us convene here in front of the Liberty Tree sapling, and my friend Pano Kanilis. Thank you very much.
Well, I don't know that I would characterize it as letting you convene here. Rather, we are honored that you're convening here. And I want to thank all of you for gathering with us today to examine the vexing issue of gun violence in our society. It's particularly apt that we gather here in Annapolis and here at St. John's College for this conversation. This is a city that has learned too intimately the tragic nature of gun violence. We are a community for which this issue is not abstract, but tragically concrete. I remember with crystal clarity the moment I heard the news of the events at the Capital Gazette. I was in Dulles Airport, just about to board a flight, when I looked up at a television monitor. On the screen, I read the headline, "Mass Shooting in Annapolis, Maryland." There was no volume, so I could not hear the report. There was no other discernible information. As a person responsible for the safety and well-being of an entire college campus, my heart sank like a stone. I did not know if our students or staff were among the victims. I felt helpless, horrified. I immediately called our chief of public safety, who filled me in on some details. The campus was safe, but several had been shot at the offices of the Capital Gazette. My heart sank again. These were my fellow Annapolitans, my neighbors. I thought of Rick Hutzel, who led this community. I thought of my good friend Gavin Buckley, who had the grave responsibility of leading our city in such a dark moment. I was immediately aware of the web of shock that spreads like wildfire when such an horrific act is committed. We are at a moment now, a year removed, when we can reflect on such an event. It is incumbent upon us to take up our responsibility to learn from this tragedy and to do so with great sobriety. In so doing, we honor those who have fallen by working to ensure that others do not fall. Convening this conversation at a seat of learning at St. John's College will hopefully inspire us to rise to this grim challenge. I welcome all of you who have joined us today and hope that our conversation achieves its ends. If what we accomplish today has even the slightest impact on the future, our time together will have been well spent indeed. So thank you all again for taking up this task, and thank you for being here. Thank you.